Hi. Modern games are used to holding the player's hand. Map markers, on-screen hints, pre-made decisions. Everything becomes clear right away, but along with that, the sense of discovery and responsibility for your own actions disappears. In this video, we're looking at games that work differently. They don't guide you along the right path. Progress here is built on attention, memory, and the ability to draw conclusions. This isn't about difficulty, it's about trust, when a game believes you're capable of understanding it on your own. Let's start with Darkwood. This isn't just a top-down survival horror game, it's a game that shatters your usual sense of safety and control. From the very beginning, it throws you into a deeply hostile forest where there are no bright markers or clear hints. You have to carefully read the environment yourself, pay attention to strange devices and notes, connect what you see, and make on-the-fly conclusions about what might help you survive. During the day, you explore the area, gather resources, uncover local mysteries, and try to understand how this world works. At night, every step you take could be your last. Barotrauma. This is a unique submarine simulator where there are no hints, only personal decisions and circumstances. The game essentially says, here's the submarine, here are its systems, here are the tasks, now figure it out. Unlike many other games, there's no direct tutorial system here. You either learn how to manage the submarine, its engineering, resource balance, and crew operations through trial and error, or you sink. Even crew management, whether it's real players or bots, demands close attention to detail. Who is doing what, who is skilled at which tasks, who is struggling, and who excels at fixing wiring or patrolling a compartment. Barotrauma turns the lack of guidance into a core part of the experience. Submarine progression, mission preparation, and dealing with immediate threats, monsters, hull breaches, flooding, all happen based on your own initiative and understanding of what matters in the moment. And when everything goes wrong, it's your mistake in your story, one you'll have to live through, talk about, and fix in the next attempt. Subnautica. Subnautica blends a vast open underwater world with a minimal guiding interface, giving the player the freedom to discover and think independently. There are no flashing trackers or follow-the-arrow prompts, only the ocean, its mysterious depths, and notes and lore fragments that you find on your own. The story and progression unfold through collected data, decoded logs, and your own assumptions, not through map icons or mandatory objectives. This method of delivering information is exactly what makes Subnautica such a strong example of a game where you connect the dots yourself to figure out where to go next. On top of that, the progression systems in Subnautica reward exploration for its own sake. Suit upgrades, vehicle construction, and base building all happen because you found a blueprint, studied the environment, and decided on your own that you're ready for the next step. Outer Wilds. This is a game that outright refuses to hold your hand, turning exploration into a pure, almost scientific process of curiosity. You find yourself in a compact solar system where every object is connected to the others, and its mysteries are revealed not through markers or hints, but only through observation, experimentation, and logical deduction. Unlike many games where progress is accompanied by signals and instructions, all you really have here are your eyes, your ears, and your desire to understand how this world works and why it behaves so strangely. The sense of discovery and the unknown matters more than the story itself, and the answers don't appear in a quest log. They form in the player's mind after countless observations and realizations. What makes Outer Wilds special is that every attempt, even one that ends in the character's death or the destruction of a planet, brings new knowledge that you can apply in the next loop. Riven. This is a successor to classic adventure games, where the world is designed so that even simple mechanisms can hide complex relationships, and no arrows will tell you the correct order to solve puzzles or where to go next. Every part of the world exists not to show you the way, but to force you to draw your own conclusions about what certain symbols, mechanisms, or sequences of levers actually mean. In Riven, observation and comparison are everything. It's a world where you build the map in your head and assemble scattered fragments into a coherent whole in order to move forward. The eerie, meticulously crafted visual aesthetic only strengthens the feeling that you're not a tourist, but a real explorer, forced to piece together a puzzle made of hundreds of interconnected elements. Battle Brothers. This is a game that doesn't hold your hand on a campaign level. There are no linear quests with markers. Instead, there's an open sandbox where every expedition, contract, and battle becomes part of your company's story. The event and contract systems are procedurally generated, but no markers suggest optimal choices. You decide what matters most for your mercenary company right now: high-paying contracts, conserving strength, or making a tactical retreat. The tactical combat in Battle Brothers is a separate challenge that doesn't automatically explain every interaction, doesn't suggest ideal moves, and doesn't guide you step by step. What you learn is what works. The combat system rewards players who think about positioning, character skills, weapon properties, and terrain, not those who simply click on a target. Legend of Grimrock. Legend of Grimrock deliberately brings the player back to the logic of classic dungeon crawlers, where awareness and orientation matter more than the interface. There's no minimap with points of interest and no highlighted solutions. Every lever, secret wall, or pressure plate requires you to understand its purpose on your own. The dungeon is built as a single interconnected mechanism. Rooms, traps, and puzzles are all linked, and the correct solution often comes not immediately, but after a series of observations and attempts. What's especially important is that Grimrock isn't afraid to make the player draw maps and take notes, even with an in-game mapping tool available. Many puzzles rely on repeating symbols, sounds, visual patterns, and spatial logic that's hard to keep in your head without writing things down. The game doesn't test reaction time or speed. It tests memory, attention, and the ability to recognize patterns. The Elder Scrolls Morrowind. One of the most famous examples of an RPG where quests exist without markers as a concept. NPCs explain directions with words, using landmarks, directions, and features of the terrain. As a result, the player is forced to actually listen to dialogue, read the journal, and visualize the world, instead of simply following an icon on the screen. Navigation mistakes are part of the experience, not a design failure. Getting lost or arriving at the wrong settlement is completely normal. Just as important, Morrowind doesn't rush to validate your actions. If you misunderstand a quest, the game won't stop you or automatically correct you. The world remains indifferent, and progress is built on understanding context, culture, politics, and geography. This is exactly what makes it an example of a design that truly trusts the player. Return of the Obra Dinn. This is a game that completely abandons traditional objective structures and replaces them with pure deduction. It doesn't tell you what to do or how to think. You're given only a set of scenes, fragments of dialogue, faces, and names that you must connect yourself. There's no correct route, no hints, and no sense that the game is guiding you. All progress is built entirely on your ability to notice details and draw logical conclusions. What makes Obra Dinn special is that it rewards active thinking rather than trial and error. Remembering accents, clothing styles, character positions, and temporal relationships becomes a key tool, and many players genuinely keep notes outside the game. Tunic. Tunic disguises itself as a cute adventure, but in reality it's a game about understanding the rules of a world that are intentionally hidden from you. There are almost no direct explanations here. Mechanics, abilities, and even basic interface elements only become clear through studying the environment and finding pages of the in-game manual. And that manual doesn't explain everything outright. It's written in a fictional language, leaving the player with fragments, diagrams, and visual hints that must be deciphered independently. Most importantly, Tunic doesn't treat ignorance as a design flaw. On the contrary, the game is built around the moment when you realize how much you didn't understand before, and that realization itself becomes a form of progression. Discoveries here don't come from leveling up or new items, but from sudden insight into how everything was actually working all along. Factorio. This is a game with no traditional quests and no correct path, despite having a clearly defined end goal. It doesn't tell you how to build your factory, doesn't offer optimal solutions, and doesn't point out where you went wrong. Instead, it gives you a set of systems, resource extraction, production, logistics, and power, and places full responsibility for how they interact on the player. Every problem here is logical, not scripted, and it's solved not with hints, but by analyzing your own designs. Factorio's defining feature is that it teaches systemic thinking rather than following instructions. If conveyor belts back up, power runs short, or production stalls, the game won't tell you what's wrong. You look at the flows, find the bottlenecks, redesign the architecture, and draw your own conclusions. Noida. This is a game where the absence of guidance is turned into a philosophy. It doesn't explain how spells work, how elements interact, or how its complex alchemy system functions. Instead, Noida's world follows strict physical and logical rules that must be discovered through experimentation. Any attempt to test something can end in sudden death, but that's exactly how the player begins to understand which combinations work and which are lethally dangerous. What's important is that Noida doesn't limit you to safe boundaries. It allows you to break the world, create absurd and destructive effects, and immediately punishes overconfidence. Many players keep notes, remember successful spell formulas, and observe material behavior because the game records nothing and explains nothing. Kenshire. This is a world where the player starts as nobody. The game sets no goals, doesn't explain what success looks like, and doesn't offer a comfortable progression path. You appear in a sandbox where every NPC, faction, and region lives by its own rules, and your actions have consequences whether you're ready for them or not. There are no quest chains leading to a correct ending, only an environment where you try to survive, understand what's happening, and find your place. Kenshi's key trait is that learning happens through observing the world, not through the interface. You figure out for yourself where it's dangerous, which cities are hostile, who can be trusted, and which decisions will lead to disaster. Death Stranding. Death Stranding looks like a modern big-budget game, but its defining feature is that it doesn't simplify navigation or decision-making. A route is never just a line from point A to point B. Terrain, weather, cargo weight, equipment, and even wind direction all matter. The game doesn't tell you which path is best. It simply gives you tools and leaves it up to you to decide how to reach your destination. Over time, Death Stranding becomes a game about planning and memory rather than action. You start remembering dangerous areas, convenient crossings, places where infrastructure is worth building, and mistakes that shouldn't be repeated. Even help from other players works not as a hint, but as context. You decide for yourself whether to trust someone else's route or chart your own. The Forgotten City. This is a rare example of a game where the absence of markers is compensated by design built on logic and attention to detail. There's almost no familiar sense of quest completion. Instead, you explore a closed world, remember characters, their habits, daily routines, and contradictions in their dialogue. Progress depends not on where you go, but on what you understand. The game rewards players who listen carefully, draw conclusions, and mentally build chains of events. Many important decisions aren't highlighted as such, and you decide for yourself which information truly matters. Outward. From the very beginning, Outward makes it clear that orientation here is a skill, not an interface feature. The map exists, but there are no markers, indicators, or points of interest on it. You have to match it to the actual landscape. Remember forks in the road, mountains, rivers, and landmarks. Even a simple trip to a nearby town can become a challenge if you weren't paying attention or decided to take a shortcut. The game doesn't try to save you from mistakes. If you get lost, you have to find your own way out. Outward clearly shows how the absence of conveniences deepens immersion. Route planning, choosing equipment, food supplies, and even the time of day become more important than any combat skills. The Long Dark. This is survival built on memory and awareness, not on the interface. The map doesn't reveal itself automatically. You literally have to draw it yourself, navigating by terrain and discovered landmarks. The game never tells you where it's safe or where it's deadly. You learn that through experience, mistakes, and careful observation of weather, terrain, and distances between shelters. What sets The Long Dark apart is that it doesn't explain its systems directly. You learn to understand cold, fatigue, and risk not through tutorials, but through consequences. Over time, a personal map of the world forms in your head, where you can wait out a storm, where hunting is worth it, and which places should be avoided at all costs. Inquisitor. This is an isometric RPG that focuses not on action, but on attention to detail and the meaning behind events. You play as an inquisitor, hunting witches through rumors, evidence, and interrogations involving torture. There is a quest journal, but it functions more as a record of facts than a guide to decisions. The game constantly puts you in situations where the outcome depends not on choosing the right dialogue option, but on how carefully you read texts, witness testimonies, and descriptions. Inquisitor doesn't guide your actions, it tests whether you actually paid attention. The game tracks quests, but it doesn't think for you. That's what separates it from more convenient RPGs. It doesn't tell you which conclusion is correct, doesn't highlight key evidence, and doesn't protect you from logical mistakes. Miss a detail, misunderstand the context, and you execute an innocent person. Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight throws the player into a vast, interconnected world with almost no interface support. The map doesn't unlock automatically. You have to earn it by finding the cartographer, buying map fragments, and personally aligning them with real space. And even having a map doesn't guarantee understanding. Many areas are intentionally confusing, filled with hidden passages and visual misdirection, forcing the player to navigate by architecture, sound, and instinct. Equally important is how the game delivers information. Hollow Knight rarely explains its systems with words. Abilities, interactions, and secrets are revealed through experimentation and careful exploration. Over time, you memorize routes, danger zones, retreat points, and places worth returning to later. Call of Cthulhu: Dark Corners of the Earth. A rare example of a horror game where the lack of assistance increases tension. The game barely uses interface explanations. You're forced to navigate by streets, interiors, conversations, and subtle environmental details. Important information often appears only once, in an NPC line, a note, or a visual scene, and if you miss it, the game won't remind you or compensate. This is especially evident in sections involving safe codes, passwords, and action sequences. There's no journal with automatic notes. The player truly has to remember or write things down. Combined with psychological effects, unstable vision, and the absence of familiar game conventions, this creates the feeling that you're not playing through a script, but surviving in a world that has no interest in your comfort. These games are united by a refusal to think for the player. They don't turn exploration into a checklist, and they don't replace understanding with hints. These games don't remove guidance, they were never built around it. In them, mistakes are part of the experience, and discoveries don't happen because of interface signals, but inside the player's mind. If you paid attention, you survived. If not, you learned. That's exactly why games like these stay with you. The Image Game Channel was with you. Have a nice day.